Good evening and welcome everyone for the Indian cities and the nationwide lockdown, Chapter 3, Chennai. And this is the part of countrywide series which focuses on the responses of different cities and different regimes to the international to the world pandemic called COVID-19 and the responses by the respective governments. So the first part, the chapter of this series was Mumbai MMR, which happened on 26th of May. The second one focused on Bhopal and Indore, the cities of Madhya Pradesh, and we have here for the third chapter. So today we have four speakers and our moderator Edwin, who works with HRF, Human Rights Advocacy and Research Foundation. We have Esther Maria Selvam from ActionAid. We have J. Sam Daniel Steren, journalist of NDTV. We have Amba Salelkar, the advocate, and we have Jerry Jones Pridarsini, who is the Panchayat secretary in Tiruvallur district. So now I will hand it over to Edwin. Before handing it over to Edwin, I would like to tell you that this broadcast will be recorded and uploaded to the official YouTube channel of Yuva, which is official Yuva at YouTube. And also you can see the control panel in the right side of your laptop, where you can ask questions in writing by typing in the question section. So now I hand it over to Edwin. I think Edwin, your audio is muted.
All right. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. We'll try to make this discussion as interactive as possible. So the format will be that the panelists will trigger off the discussion, and then we'll open up the floor so that we can get more responses and sharper questions. And then we come back to the panelists so that they can also respond, and their responses and the presentations of their experience, which is extremely rich, will be suited to your interests, yeah? So that it becomes a conversation rather than a one-way kind of thing. So I thank everybody for coming in. Saturday evening is not the best of times, and certainly the world and our country is not going through the best of times either. So every country is different, but every city is different, and every city is different in its own way. Now, I don't think I'm making this up, but Chennai, we have much before the Supreme Court came down after 60 days and said, you need to look at the situation of the migrants, the central government, state government, I don't care who, they must pay, and the migrant labor must go back free. The Chennai High Court said that the situation of the migrants bring tears to our eyes. And this when the Supreme Court actually has no time for the migrants, but has time to decide whether India should be called Bharat or India. I'm not making this up. Yeah. But we also have a situation where, despite knowing that unless there is a local government in place, we have the Varda cyclone, we have so many other cyclones, natural disasters. We know that the urban and rural local self-governments must be in place for a specific, efficient response. We still have no local government in Chennai. So that makes it a little different, but also adds to the complexities. And disasters by themselves are very messy affairs. And when we don't have the institutional mechanisms, that becomes even worse. Yeah. we were forced to fall back on our own resources. The government gave just 1 or 2 days wages, I think, to last a lockdown that has gone on for more than 60 days. Just 1,000 rupees and 2 months of rations. How? And then the government also went to the court to say that no NGO should do relief work. So this is the kind of messiness, trying to make up rules as we go along. 4,000 government orders in 40 days. Yeah. So when things like this are going on, we don't really need to look to the stars or the astrologers and find out whether things are going wrong or not. And on top of all this, we do have situations of bricklayer labor being brutalized, and then, of all things, the police going and saying that it was just a domestic violence case, as a domestic violence in itself is not bad enough. Yeah. So we do have the good, the bad, the ugly. Our panelists are all very rooted in the ground. They have been dealing with all these multiple breakdowns. Actually, it's a multi-organ failure. So I'll call Esther to go first, and about 5 to 6 minutes, Esther, and then we go on to the next. So one request, everybody, if you're not talking, please mute your phone, microphones. Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be part of this webinar series, which is basically trying to look at what are the impact that is caused due to this pandemic as well as the lockdown on people who are living in poverty, particularly the labor force, and also with special reference to migrant workers in the city of Chennai. As we all know, Chennai's 2020 population is now estimated to be over 1 crore. Whereas if you look back in the year 1950, the population was much less compared to this. And we all know that Chennai has also grown over the period in terms of due to urbanization, the population has increased. And according to UN World Urbanization Prospects, if we see, Chennai has really grown by almost about I mean, year 2000, since 2015, if you see, it's really grown. So what they are actually saying is it all contributes due to the urban agglomeration. So if we really look at the population of Chennai city, Chennai city is actually the 4th most populous metropolitan area in India. And also it is the 31st largest urban area in the world. If you look at in the, I mean, I just want to give all this data so that we can actually look at the current scenario in relation to this. If you look at in the context of the size of city and the population density, over the time, the area has really grown from 176 square kilometers to 426 kilometers after 2011 expansion. And Chennai is also the most densely populated city in Tamil Nadu. And also it has got the 3rd largest population in terms of refugees. So if you look at the population of Chennai, almost most of them are Tamils, and 62% of them are migrants to the city from different parts of the state, from different districts. And if you look at the migrant population from the other state, it contributes to around 34%. From outside of India, there are about 4%. And Chennai also has the 4th highest population of slum dwellers in the whole of India. And it's estimated to be around 19% of the total population. And for sure, it is an underestimation. Having given this background about this Chennai city, let me get into the ground reality post-COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown. Now we are almost like approaching the lockdown phase of 5. And as I was just glancing through the papers this morning, I found that our CM has already indicated that on the 29th, COVID-19 lockdown might be extended to beyond 31st of May. This is what like even when Mr. Devashak Hayam, the former civil servant, when he has indicated, he has pointed out that for almost about 1.3 billion human beings, just 4 hours was given for them to start their lives. And what is currently happening is a lot of uncertainty. Initially, when this whole pandemic began, what we have seen on the ground was the too much of power being exercised by the police over the community people. And my own personal experience at the time of when we were distributing food, the biggest challenge that we have faced in all this process of relief distribution was it was so very difficult for us to actually get the permission from whichever authority may be responsible. I almost went up to the level of Chennai City Corporation, and I also approached the State Relief Commissioner. The only my experience was I could not get anything in paper, the permission for me to carry on with my relief distribution and even the cooked food that we were actually serving. And just this morning, I received this information from the field. In the initial stage, there were a lot of challenges in terms of accessing testing facilities for the people. From our own experience, in one of the places where we were actually distributing dry ration, we came to know that after all our dry distribution was over, the very next day we found that the person who was actually accompanying us to provide this dry ration, his wife was infected with the virus. So then naturally in the initial stage, we all were like so much fear of knowing this. And immediately some of the volunteers who were on the ground, who were actually asked to go for testing. When they went to the hospitals, absolutely no testing facilities was actually available for them. And they were told simply by the health officials, okay, you can go back, and if you have more symptoms, then we can actually look into considering the test. And if you look at Chennai City, and whatever I'm saying is this is actually just not confined only to the COVID-19 period. This situation was actually prevailing in the Chennai City even much before the COVID-19. And this is what all this while we have been actually struggling and claiming. Most of the people who are living in poverty, who are dependent on the informal economy, who are actually supposed to be living in the city once upon a day, where their livelihood is dependent. After a point of Tamil Nadu is prone to disaster, and every disaster has been actually considered to be an opportunity for invariably forcibly evict and relocate these kind of people who are living in poverty, and thereby in the relocation sites, what they have been deprived of is their access to quality public services. So as it is, these people were already struggling to claim this quality services. Now this pandemic is actually added to the who's already it is in existence. And all these laborers, they also face so much of the challenges on the ground. Till date, nobody is able to actually venture out. I'm just returning from the relief distribution, where we have requested some of the single women who were actually selling on the beach some sundal, some eatables on the beach. When we requested them to come to receive the dry ration, they said, "Madam, how could we come, because there's no transport." If you really look at the population who are actually most of the informal sector workers, as well the migrant workers. Earlier, I was quite well aware of the presence of informal workers in the periphery of Chennai City, whereas this COVID pandemic has actually really opened up my eyes to the plight of the migrant workers, who are also almost and the extent of the city. They were residing, most of them are in the periphery of the city. As actually Sainath has rightly pointed out, the most telling human stories of late is all about migrant workers. For me also, this almost more than 2 months, this has really opened up me to understand the plight of migrant workers. I was personally involved in terms of distributing relief dry ration for these migrant workers. We all know that Chennai is among the 13 most affected COVID-19 cities, as they have been contributing to 70% of the positive cases in the country. So if you really go to these peripheries and see how the way the migrant workers and the informal sector workers there, otherwise they are known as city makers, who actually beautify our city, whereas they are actually, they have no other go there, and they have to be actually relocated to the periphery of the city, and hardly they have any access to any kind of services. So that's what we have actually seen from our experience. And we are talking in the context of COVID-19 and the lockdown period, we are talking about physical distancing, we are talking about wearing masks and various other things. I really what we need to reflect at this point of time is, like, for example, one of the largest relocation site that is in Chennai, that is Kannagi Nagar, where the house is only of the habitation size is just 118 square feet. If you go to Chemanjeri, it's just 158 square feet. And if you go to Perumbakam, it's just hardly 270, 320. And now they are trying to consider 400 square feet. Imagine, like, for an entire time, the children and the family, they have to just spend their whole time within this limited space, and what kind of life that they will be going through. And some of my experiences that is in the recent past, very recent one is the day before yesterday one. Every day we get instances not only of how these people are struggling for their day-to-day life and livelihood, also of so much of brutality and violence faced by these informal sector workers and migrant workers by their employees. In one such instances where we were able to immediately intervene, of course, in everything at this point of time, what we are able to do successfully, anything on the ground, is with the support of district administration and varied state officials, because we cannot go to any place because it's justified. Because sometimes we may be the potential carriers where we, in the name of doing something good, we might actually transmit the virus and come. So it is justified. And of course, every time whenever we were doing this distribution, district officials used to accompany us, the RDO used to accompany us, the revenue inspector used to accompany us. We did have challenges. In some districts, we had a very good cooperation. In some locations, we didn't have much of it, but still we managed to do all these things. What is the challenging thing is, like, Tamil Nadu being the most.
Shall we do the challenges little later? Yeah. Okay. When we come back, we'll do the challenges.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just conclude this with this point.
Sure.
Because I consider this as a very important point, because the Tamil Nadu being prone to disaster, all this while always the state machineries used to work along with the civil society organization, forming the coordination committee, wherein we had an opportunity to be part of the decision making process. But during the lockdown and COVID-19, this is the biggest thing that we could see on the ground, where absolutely nil people's participation or people's participation in any kind of a decision making process. This is the most challenging thing in this present context. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Everybody has got a richness of experience, but we'll come back to this. I'm really sorry to cut you off. It's very interesting to listen to. The main point that Esther was making, that this is actually a medical emergency. It is, but it is being, the response is being more of a policing crisis. And as if it's, you're trying to regulate the criminal activity. Yeah, that, and the entire state response has been on that. Just one point of order. யாராவது பேசணும்னா தமிழ்ல கூட பேசலாம். No, that is not an issue at all. Please do that. Our next speaker is Priyadarshini. She's the Panchayat President. Priyadarshini, yeah.
வணக்கம் சார். திருவள்ளூர் மாவட்டம் திருவள்ளூர் தெற்கு ஒன்றியம் நத்தமேடு ஊராட்சியில இருந்து பிரியதர்ஷினி பேசுறேன்.
சொல்லுங்கம்மா, நீங்க கிளியரா இருக்கு.
சார், உயிர்கொல்லியா இருக்கும் கொரோனா வைரஸ்ல இருந்து அரசு அறிவித்துள்ள 144 ஊரடங்கு உத்தரவிட்ட நாள் முதல் எங்களோட தலைவராகிய என்னுடைய முயற்சியால மக்களுக்கு தேவையான அரிசி மற்றும் காய்கறிகள் சுமார் 30,000 குடும்பங்களுக்கு கொடுத்துருக்கோம் சார். 3,000 குடும்பங்களுக்கு கொடுத்துருக்கோம் சார். மற்றும் ஊராட்சியில் உள்ள பொதுமக்களுக்கு ஒலிபெருக்கி மூலம் கொரோனா வைரஸ் பற்றிய விழிப்புணர்வு ஏற்படுத்த கை கழுவும் முறையையும் மக்களுக்கு விழிப்புணர்வு ஏற்படுத்தக்கூடியதாய் ஒவ்வொரு செய்கைகளையும் நாங்க செஞ்சு கொண்டிருக்கோம் சார். பஞ்சாயத்து முழுவதும் கிருமி நாசினியும் மற்றும் ப்ளீச்சிங் பவுடர் அப்ளை பண்ணி மக்களை நாங்க பாதுகாப்பா வச்சிருக்கோம். எங்க ஊராட்சியில இருக்க 9 வார்டு பகுதிகளிலும் தெருக்களிலும் கிருமி நாசினி மற்றும் ப்ளீச்சிங் பவுடர் தெளித்து சுத்தம் செய்யப்பட்டுள்ளது. ஊராட்சியில் உள்ள தூய்மை பணி காவலர்கள் மூலமாக ஊராட்சி முழுவதும் குப்பைகளை அனுதினமும் நாங்கள் அகற்றிக் கொண்டிருக்கிறோம். ஊராட்சியில் உள்ள 9 வார்டுகளிலும் வாரத்தில் 4 நாட்கள் கபசுர குடிநீர் பொதுமக்களுக்கு நோய் எதிர்ப்பு சக்திக்கு வழங்கப்பட்டு வருகிறது. கொரோனா வைரஸ் பாதிப்புக்கு உள்ளான 9 நபர்களின் வீடுகளுக்கு சென்று கிருமி நாசினி மற்றும் ப்ளீச்சிங் பவுடர் தெளித்து சுத்தம் செய்து வருகிறோம் சார். ஊராட்சியில் NRGS வேலை செய்யும் பெண்களுக்கு தினமும் கபசுர குடிநீர் வழங்கி கொண்டு வருகிறோம். ஹலோ,
சொல்லுங்கம்மா.
சரிங்க சார். ஊராட்சியில் எவரேனும் இறந்து விட்டால் உடனே அந்த வீட்டிற்கும் அதை சுற்றியுள்ள பகுதிகளுக்கும் கிருமி நாசினி தெளித்து ப்ளீச்சிங் பவுடர் போடப்பட்டு வருகிறது. கொரோனா பாதித்த 9 நபர்களின் வீடுகளுக்கும் சென்று அவர்களது குடும்பங்களுக்கு அத்தியாவசிய தேவைகளான அரிசி மற்றும் காய்கறிகள், பிரெட் வழங்கி கொண்டிருக்கிறோம் சார். ஊராட்சியில் உள்ள முடித்திருத்தும் தொழிலாளர்கள் மற்றும் ஆட்டோ ஓட்டுநர்கள், நலிந்தோர் குடும்பங்களுக்கு 5 கிலோ அரிசி மற்றும் காய்கறிகள் சுமார் 100 குடும்பங்களுக்கு வழங்கியுள்ளோம். மாற்றுத்திறனாளிகள் மற்றும் திருநங்கைகளின் குடும்பங்களுக்கு சுமார் 50 குடும்பங்களுக்கு அரிசி மற்றும் காய்கறிகள் வழங்கியுள்ளோம் சார். இது தன்னார்வலர்கள் மூலமாகவும் மற்றும் எங்களுடைய முயற்சியின் மூலமாக நாங்க ஒவ்வொரு வசதியா இருக்கிற ஒவ்வொரு பீப்புள் கிட்டையும் போய் நாங்க கேட்டு வாங்கி எங்க ஜனங்களுக்கு வழங்கியிருக்கோம். ஒரே ஒரு ட்ரஸ்ட்ல இருந்து ஹெல்ப் பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. இப்பவும் வழங்கி கொண்டுதான் இருக்கிறோம். எங்க பஞ்சாயத்துல இருக்க ஒவ்வொரு குடும்பங்களுக்கும் நாங்க எங்களால் முடிஞ்ச உதவிகளை செஞ்சு கொண்டு இருக்கோம். அரசு வழங்கிய 10 கிலோ அரிசி மற்றும் 1000 ரூபாய் மக்களுக்கு போதுமானதா இல்ல. மக்கள் மிகவும் கஷ்டப்பட்டுறாங்க. எங்க பஞ்சாயத்துல இருக்கிற மொத்த மக்களும் மிகவும் ஏழைப்படுத்தப்பட்டோர், நலிந்தோர் இப்படிதான் இருக்காங்க. அவங்களுக்கு எங்களால முடிஞ்ச உதவிகளை நாங்க செஞ்சு கொண்டு இருக்கோம். இருந்தாலும் இதுக்கு மேல லாக்டவுன் நீடிச்சா அவங்களுக்கு எங்களால முடிஞ்ச உதவி பண்ண முடியுமான்றது தெரியல சார். ஹலோ,
ஓகே.
இப்போ கபசுர குடிநீரும் நாங்க தொடர்ந்து வழங்கி கொண்டா இருக்கோம் சார். இப்போ 9 பேர் பாதிக்கப்பட்டிருக்காங்க. அதுல 4 பேர் டிஸ்சார்ஜ் ஆகி வந்துட்டாங்க. 5 பேர் சிகிச்சையில இருக்காங்க. எங்க பஞ்சாயத்து மிகவும் பெரிய பஞ்சாயத்து சார். 16,000 மக்கள் இருக்காங்க. மக்கள் தொகை 16,000 இருக்கு சார்.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So, hers is a fairly big village, and there are about 10,000 voters in itself over there, but it's very close to Chennai. What she's saying is that the government did give some initial assistance, which was 1,000 rupees for the 60-day lockdown and 2 months of rations. But after that, she, as a responsible panchayat person, elected representative, they have been going around and collecting money from philanthropists, from other organizations, NGOs, to keep the heads above water. Yeah, thank you very much. Sam, can you manage with the phone for this one, or? We'll just wait for Sam Daniel to come, because he's been reporting on the ground. So he'll have a very different perspective, and an all-city perspective at that. Sam? Ankit, could you check with Sam, please? Okay. In the meanwhile, shall we go across to Amba? Amba, is that all right with you? Are you ready or?
Sure.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Go ahead. Oh, I think, great.
Okay. So can I start? Okay. This is my presentation is looking specifically at persons with disabilities in Chennai and Tamil Nadu, but also this is based on some research that has actually taken place at the national level. This research was done with the participation of about, I want to say 12, 13 national level organizations of persons with disabilities, and specifically looked at social protection and persons with disabilities at the time of the COVID-19 outbreak. Now, we know that for persons with disabilities, things are already quite discriminatory in the sense that persons with disabilities have much less access to steady employment, to healthcare, as you know, even just going out and enjoying public facilities because of considerations of accessibility and of discrimination when you compare it to people without disabilities. And what the coronavirus has done is that it's just taken those existing discriminations and just made it much wider. So, you know, the gap between people with disabilities and the others has just sort of increased. So it's something which was looking at the experience of persons with disabilities, as well as looking at the social protection which was available to them. Now, we all know that the lockdown was basically issued with just 4 hours of preparation. And within those 4 hours, to get information to people was difficult enough. Getting that information to people with disabilities, many of whom had communication issues, who need information in accessible formats, including sign language, including easy to read or other kinds of audiovisual formats, was absolutely out of the question. As a result, even till date, people with disabilities find major barriers in even getting the information regarding the lockdown, regarding the rules on the lockdown, what facilities are available and what are not. We should also remember that persons with disabilities may have or more likely to have pre-existing health conditions, which means that they're quite vulnerable if they acquire any other infections. So for persons with disabilities, their only option was to stay indoors. But for many persons with disabilities who require support from another person, sometimes the support is given by someone who comes and visits them maybe for an hour or so a day just to help them maybe have a bath or to sit up. Some people have more intensive support. Because of the lockdown and because of the fact that these persons were not recognized initially as essential support people, they were not allowed to enter or meet their clients, and this has created its own set of issues. We have children with disabilities who are in schools which not only impart education but also provide other services like rehabilitation, etc. And they have been taken out of these systems and they are at home. And often their parents, because these are professional services, their parents are not in a position to give it to them. And of course, there is the issue that families who have people with disabilities are already under financial stress because the cost of living with a disability is much higher than the cost of living without a disability. Which brings us to the point on social protection. We know that after the lockdown, certain announcements were made to talk about social protection measures for persons with disabilities. Now, at the national level, there was a top up to the NSAP scheme, which is the national flagship scheme on pensions relating to old age, disability, widow pension, and women with Jan Dhan accounts. So the NSAP scheme, there was a cash transfer made to NSAP beneficiaries. There would be a one-off top-up of the NSAP pension for those who already receive pension, and that would be given in 3 installments. Now, the issue with that is that the coverage, if you look at the number of persons with disabilities in India, as has been identified in the census, and if we look at the people who are covered by this scheme, there's a huge gap. The research is that not even 10% of the persons with disabilities in India are beneficiaries of this scheme. So that's 90% of these beneficiaries. We don't know how they are receiving support during this time. It's important also to know that this scheme on disability pension only covers people above the age of 18 until the age of 60. After the age of 60, you are only entitled to you're only entitled to the old age pension, and children with disabilities get no financial benefits at all from the national level. The NSAP is rupees 300 per month, and this is topped up by states. States have a varying level of top-up. Some states offer no top-up. Some states offer more. And we know that with regard to persons with disabilities, there's been a huge discrepancy in what states have been provided. Kerala, who we all think is the, is the champion in terms of the relief being given, has offered food kits, hot cooked food, and the Kerala top up to the NSAP has been given, and the disability sector in Kerala is quite happy with this. In Tamil Nadu, 2 months disability maintenance has been paid in advance to persons with disabilities. And also, after the advocacy of the civil society, a helpline was set up for persons with disabilities exclusively within the Office of the Commissioner of Persons with Disabilities in Tamil Nadu. These helplines were manned by volunteers from civil society. There was also a WhatsApp number if you needed to communicate. So if somebody put their phone on mute, I can hear a mobile alert, and it's throwing me off. I'm sorry. So in Tamil Nadu, in Tamil Nadu, this is the helpline was given prominence. In the research that took place talking to persons with disabilities, the distribution of extra payment, pension, and maintenance was slow. And as of last week, only a few districts had been covered so far. The helpline is quite responsive in the urban areas, but people in the rural areas are either not informed about the helpline, or they can't get through to the helpline, or if they can get through to the helpline, they don't get the support that they require. And this is a huge, we have to remember that when it comes to persons with disabilities, even in a non-COVID situation, the services are only limited to the district level. So if you're in the sub-district level, there is no access to services. You have to go to the district. So this is a huge challenge in the districts like Tiruvallur and other districts where there's a huge outbreak of the cases and people are not able to access services. The data that I have relied on is in a report, and I will try and circulate the report through the organizers to look at the specific condition of persons with disabilities. But I'm happy to take questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amba. That was really short and sharp. I know you have a wealth of data to back up whatever you said. And I think when the questions come in, we will be needing more of that. For others who are on listening so patiently, you can go to the top right hand of your panel and write down the questions that you want to ask. Yeah, that is also possible. And I'm seeing some of my friends over here who have got a lot of field experience. I hope you will come in and share some of that. We'll do that shortly, but now Sam's mic is working. Unfortunately, I think his camera still isn't. But Sam, can you come on now? Is that all right? I hope we can get Sam because uh-oh. Now Sam is now offline. Let's see whether we can get him on after that. Okay, so I'll just go around to somebody with whom I can see and is online and does have a lot of experience. Dr. Venkatraman is here. Venkat, could you share your thoughts on this? Dr. Venkatraman's specialization is children in conflict, and he's got a lot of field experience and policy level experience. So, Venkat, can you come online? And I also recognize that Almelu is here, and though she's not from Chennai, I think her experience in Salem would be very useful to listen to. Yeah,
Hi,
but
Edwin.
Dr. Venkat?
Yeah, hi, Edwin. I'm online now. Thank you.
Great.
And thanks for this invitation to just give some inputs. It was a very interesting discussion so far. I just want to picking on some of the points already discussed is the issue of the learning that's been affected for children, especially in the sort of urban poor areas, like Esther was talking about areas like Semanjeri and Kannagi Nagar. See, the issue is, although during the lockdown, children from going to private schools and education, the learning somehow happened with the use of technology through online learning platforms and everything. But the problem is children who are attending, like government schools and corporation schools. There has been a lot of issues about, the learning has stopped, and even if that has happened, the issue of quality and how do we actually monitor what's going on. So, to put it simply, that already the digital divide has created this big chasm between people who have and have nots, and the children, and with this COVID scenario, my fear is that this gap is widening because lack of access to technology to continue learning. Although we can say that even other modes of learning can be tried out, but we don't have enough sort of information and evidence as to what's happening. So this is a very critical factor. When I'm talking about children, I'm also including pre-primary children and primary and secondary education. Now, so how are we with the lockdown getting extended again and again? So from an education perspective, I'm more concerned about skills lost, and it also opens up the issue about the teachers' sort of ability to use such information technology to give, sort of continue this sort of education. There's also been an issue of whether the curriculum that's been available are actually designed for such kind of distance and online learning. So this is a very serious issue that has to, and not many are actually discussing. At the same time, we also need to look into the health and nutrition component of children, especially in the urban poor areas, as well as children belonging to the sort of migrant workers. So these are issues that maybe we need to relook, and to what extent the system is actually preparing, assuming that there will be a time when the lockdown will be eased and education is going to continue. Not many are very clear as to how this is going to happen. Especially, can overcrowded government schools can afford to have teaching and learning happening inside classrooms with physical distancing? How are they going to go about doing this? Rather than me giving any sort of suggestions. I'm just posing these questions and also raising this as a concern, which requires a lot more discussion to happen, not only at the policy level, but also among the civil society organizations who are actually working in the field. Maybe if some possibility happens in the near future, I think civil society organizations can work with some of these government schools, not only in the cities, also in the rural areas, to see how best they can ensure quality learning can happen post the COVID lockdown. Thank you, Edmund.
Yeah, thank you, Venkat. Alamelu, can you talk next? Share your experience. You've been putting up your hand for a very long time. Alamelu, கேக்குதா?
சார் நான் பேசுறது கேக்குதுங்களா?
இப்போ கேக்குதுமா, சொல்லுங்க.
ஓகே சார், ஓகே சார். தலித் பெண்கள் பாதிப்பு COVID-19 சார். ஹலோ சார்.
பேசுங்க.
ஓகே சார், ஓகே சார். தலித் பெண்களுக்கு வந்து பாதிப்பு COVID-19 சேலம் டிஸ்ட்ரிக்ட் அப்படிங்கிறதுல வந்து நான் பேசுறேங்க சார். மோஸ்ட்லி தலித் விமன்ஸ் ஆர் லேண்ட்லெஸ் பீப்புள் அண்ட் டெய்லி வேஜஸ். இந்த விவசாயம் இந்த மாதிரி தான் சார், விவசாய கட்டட வேலைகளுக்கு போறவங்க இருக்காங்க. மோர் ஆர் லெஸ் எல்லா விமன்ஸும் பார்த்தோம்னா ஆல் விமன்ஸ் தினக்கூலிகளாகும். மோஸ்ட்லி இவங்க வந்து கிளீனிங் ஒர்க்குக்கு போறவங்களாவும் தான் இருக்காங்க. இவங்க அன்றாட தேவைகளுக்கு போதுமானது அன்னன்னைக்கு சம்பாதிச்சு சாப்பிட்ட அளவுக்கு இருந்தாங்க. இவங்களுக்கான மருத்துவ வசதி இதெல்லாம் பார்த்தோம்னா எதுவுமே இந்த COVID-19 பார்த்தோம்னா மோஸ்ட்லி எல்லா பெண்களும் லாக்டவுன் ஆனதுனால லாக்டவுன்ல பெண்கள் எல்லாருமே வீட்டுல இருக்க வேண்டிய சுச்சுவேஷன். மைக்ரேட் ஆகி பாண்டட் லேபரா அதர் டிஸ்ட்ரிக்டோ மத்த ஸ்டேட்கோ போனவங்க எல்லாம் அங்கங்க லாக்டவுன் ஆகி அங்கே நின்னுட்டாங்க. இவங்களுக்கு இந்த டைம்ல ரொம்ப ரொம்ப பிரச்சனையானது வந்து மெயின்லி ஃபுட் ப்ராப்ளம் இருந்தது. ஃபுட் ப்ராப்ளம் என்னன்னா அவங்க வந்து ஏற்கனவே சேவிங்ஸோ மற்றதோ இல்லாத ஒரு காரணத்தினால இவங்களுக்கு சாப்பாடு ஒரு பிக் ப்ராப்ளம் இருந்தது. அது மட்டும் இல்லாம இந்த COVID-19 வந்து கவர்மெண்ட் வந்து எல்லா ரேஷன் கார்டுகளுக்கும் 1000 rupees 1000 rupees 10 kg ரைஸ் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி கொடுத்தாங்க. அது என்னன்னா அந்த ரேஷன் கார்டு உள்ள தலித் விமன்ஸ்க்கு மட்டும்தான் கிடைச்சது. மோஸ்ட்லி தலித்தார் பாண்டட் லேபரா இருக்கிறனாலயோ அவங்களுக்கு வந்து ரேஷன் கார்டோ மத்த இல்லாதனால அந்த பணம் வந்து அவங்களோட வாங்க முடியல, அந்த ரேஷனும் வாங்க முடியல. நம்ம கலெக்டர் கிட்ட கம்ப்ளைண்ட் பண்ண அடிப்படையில வந்து சரி ரேஷன் கார்டு இல்லாதவங்களுக்கும் அந்த அரிசியும் பிளஸ் அந்த 1000 rupees கொடுக்குறேன்னு சொன்னாங்க. பட் அந்த 1000 rupees மட்டும் தான் கிடைச்ச வந்து அரிசி கிடைக்கல. அது மட்டும் இல்லாத இவங்களுக்கு சாப்பாடுக்கு ரொம்ப பிரச்சனைனால இப்ப வந்து மேலும் மேலும் அதிக வட்டிக்கு கடன் வாங்க ஆரம்பிச்சுட்டாங்க. அந்த கடனை திருப்பி செலுத்த முடியலன்னா இப்ப வந்து நாங்க கொஞ்சம் கொஞ்சமா பாண்டட் லேபர் ரெஸ்கியூ பண்ணி அவங்களுக்கு வந்து சுய தொழில் ஆரம்பிச்சு கொடுத்துக்கிறோம். அவங்க தொழில் இப்போ செய்ய முடியல. அப்ப அவங்க மறுபடியும் பாண்டட் லேபரா ஆகிறதுக்கு அந்த 99% அதிகமா இருக்குது. அடுத்தது வந்து என்னன்னா அந்த COVID-19 வந்து இப்போ புலம்பெயர்ந்த தொழிலாளர்களுக்கு வந்து 50,000க்கு மேற்பட்ட புலம்பெயர் தொழிலாளர்கள் தங்கறதுக்கு இடமோ உண்ண உணவின்றி ரொம்ப சிரமமா இருக்காங்க. இந்த நிலைமையில வந்து பார்த்தோம்னா பட்டினி சாவுகள் தான் அதிகமானது. செக்ஷுவல் ஹராஸ்மெண்ட் வந்து அதிகமாக இருக்குது தலித் விமன் மத்தியில. முன்னையெல்லாம் வந்து வேலைக்கு போயிருவாங்க, வேலை இடத்துல பணி தளங்கள்ல இந்த மாதிரி செக்ஷுவல் ஹராஸ்மெண்ட் நடக்கும் அப்படின்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. பட் வந்து இப்ப எல்லாம் வீட்டுல நெய்பர்ஸ் எல்லாம் இருக்கிறதுனால பெண் குழந்தைகளுக்கும் இந்த மாதிரி செக்ஷுவல் ஹராஸ்மெண்ட் செக்ஷுவல் அபியூஸ் இந்த மாதிரி நடந்துட்டு இருக்கு. டொமஸ்டிக் வயலன்ஸ் வந்து அதிகமாயிடுச்சு தலித் விமனுக்கு. என்னன்னா இப்ப வந்து ஆல்கஹால் எல்லாம் ஓபன் பண்ணி விட்டாங்க. ஆல்கஹால் ஓபன் பண்ணி விட்டதுனால அவங்களுக்கு வந்து நிறைய விமன்ஸ்க்கு அடி தடி இது புடைக்கிறது இந்த மாதிரி ப்ராப்ளம்ஸ் நிறைய இருக்கு. ஏர்லி மேரேஜஸ் நிறைய நடக்குது. காரணம் என்னன்னா நிறைய பேர் வந்து இந்த டைம்ல வந்து கவர்மெண்ட் எதுவுமே கண்டுக்காது, அதனால நம்ம சின்ன வயசுல கல்யாணம் பண்ணி கொடுத்துடலாம் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி சின்ன சின்ன வயசுலயே நிறைய பேர் 10 பேர் 15 பேர் உள்ள அதுக்கு நிறைய பேருக்கு வந்து ஏர்லி மேரேஜ் நடக்குது. அடுத்தது இந்த நலவாரி அட்டைகள் வந்து இருக்கு மூலமா 2000 ருபீஸும் அரிசி கொடுக்குறது சொல்லியிருந்தாங்க. பட் வந்து அந்த நலவாரி ஆல்ரெடி எந்தெந்த தலித்ஸ் வந்து விமன் வந்து பதிவு பண்ணியிருந்தாங்களோ அவங்களுக்கு மட்டும்தான் கிடைச்சது, மற்றவங்களுக்கு கிடைக்கல. மில் ஒர்க்கு பார்த்தோம்னா மில் ஒர்க்கு அங்கங்க மைக்ரேட் ஆகி தலித் பெண்கள் நிறைய பேர் 99% மில் ஒர்க்கரா இருக்காங்க. அந்த பெண்கள் வந்து அங்கங்கே லாக்டவுன் ஆயிட்டாங்க. மெயின்லி அந்த மில் நிர்வாகமே சாப்பாடு போடல, நிறைய பெண்களுக்கு போடல. நாங்க போய் ஒவ்வொரு மில்ல முதல்லயே பார்த்து அவங்க சாப்பாடு கொடுங்க அந்த லாக்டவுன் முடிகிறதுல அப்படின்னு சொல்லி நம்ம சொல்லி பேசியிருக்கிறோம். முடியாத பட்சத்துல நம்ம மூலமா நிறைய பேருக்கு அந்த நிவாரணங்கள் கொடுத்து பண்ணிருக்கோம். அப்புறம் நிறைய பெண்கள் மன ரீதியா பாதிக்கப்பட்டிருக்காங்க இந்த COVID-19னால. ஏற்கனவே கடன் வாங்கி கடன் கட்ட முடியாது தலித் பெண்கள். அதே மாதிரி வந்து இப்ப சாப்பாடு பிரச்சனை, கணவரோட பிரச்சனை, இல்ல ஆல்கஹால் ப்ராப்ளம்னால அவங்க வந்து மன ரீதியா பயங்கரமான ஒரு பாதிப்புக்குள்ளா இருக்கிறாங்க. அடுத்தது கவர்மெண்ட் வந்து என்ன பண்ணுதுன்னா ரோடு போடுறதுக்கு 1500 கோடி 1800 கோடி வரை இந்த கோவிட் டைம்ல கூட அவங்க வந்து ஒதுக்கி இருக்கிறாங்க. பட் இவங்களுக்கு வந்து இந்த மக்களுக்கு தலித் மக்களுக்கோ மற்ற பெண்களுக்கோ அவங்களுக்கு உண்டானது அந்த உதவிகள் செய்ய அவங்க கிட்ட காசு இல்ல அப்படின்னு சொல்றாங்க. இந்த ஆல்கஹால் பாண்டட் லேபர்னு பார்த்தா ஹெல்த் ரீதியாகவும் அவங்க மீன்ஸ் இல்லாம நிறைய மோஸ்ட்லி வந்து அவங்க எல்லாருமே ரத்த சோகை நோயினால பாதிக்கப்பட்டு அவங்க ரொம்ப சிரமத்துலதான் இருக்காங்க. இந்த மாதிரி தலித் பெண்கள் வந்து இவ்வளவு சிரமத்தை அனுபவிச்சுட்டு இருக்காங்க. பட் வந்து கவர்மெண்ட்டுக்கு உண்டானது கவர்மெண்ட் வந்து தன்னுடைய கடமையை செய்ய தவறிடுச்சு சொல்றாங்க. ஒருத்தர் கூட என்கிட்ட சாப்பாடு இல்லைன்னு கேட்கல அப்படின்னு முதலமைச்சர் தமிழக முதல்வர் சொல்றாருங்க. ஒரு கம்ப்ளைண்ட் கூட என்கிட்ட வரல அப்படின்னு சொல்றாருங்க. ஆனா அதே டைம்ல சேம் டைம்ல எத்தனை பேர் நாங்களே வச்சு கம்ப்ளைண்ட் கலெக்டருக்கு எல்லாம் ஒரு 16 பேர் வச்சு நாங்க கம்ப்ளைண்ட் பண்ணோம், சாப்பாடு இல்ல அரிசி கொடுங்க அப்படின்னு சொல்லி கம்ப்ளைண்ட் பண்ணோம். அது எல்லாம் முதல்வர் காதுக்கு போகலையா இல்ல போயும் முதல்வர் வந்து அதை கண்டுக்கலையா அப்படிங்கறதுதான் இப்போ வந்து பெரிய ஒரு வருத்தமான செய்தியா இருக்கு. இந்த நிலைமையில தலித் பெண்களும் தலித் குழந்தைகளும் குறிப்பாக தலித் பெண்கள் தலித் பெண் குழந்தைகள் தான் ரொம்ப பாதிக்கப்பட்டிருக்காங்க. இந்த பாதிப்புல இருந்து நீங்கிறதுக்கு இன்னும் வெகு காலமாகும். ஏன்னா மறுபடியும் வந்து நாங்க பாண்டட் லேபர் ரெஸ்கியூ பண்ணீங்க, மறுபடியும் பாண்டட் லேபர் ஆகிறதுக்கு ஒருவேளை சாப்பாடு போட்டா கூட போதும் அப்படின்னு சாப்பிடுற லெவல்ல இருக்காங்க. அந்த மாதிரி இருக்கிறப்போ ரொம்ப சிரமமா இருக்குது. அப்புறம் வந்து என்ஜிஓஸ் வந்து இதுல வந்து COVID-19 நிறைய வந்து தலித் பெண்களுக்கு அந்த நிவாரணங்கள் கொடுத்தாங்க. ஒரு சில நிறைய என்ஜிஓஸ் அவங்க சொல்றாங்க கவர்மெண்ட் வந்து மற்றவர்கள் கூட சொல்றாங்க நீங்க எதுக்கு செய்யறீங்க, ஏன் கவர்மெண்ட் செய்யட்டும் அப்படின்னு சொல்றாங்க. பட் கவர்மெண்ட் செய்யட்டும்னு எதிர்பார்த்திருந்தா நிறைய பட்டினி சாவு ஏற்பட்டிருக்கும். இப்பவே வந்து மைக்ரேஷன் நிறைய பேர் வந்து பட்டினி சாவு இருக்காங்க. ரயில் ரோட்ல வந்து இருந்து 18 பேரை ரயில் அடிச்சுட்டு போய் கொண்டு இருக்கு. இந்த மாதிரி சூழ்நிலையில இருக்கிறப்போ அந்த கவர்மெண்ட் வந்து எந்த அளவுக்கு அவங்களோட சாப்பாடு ஃபெசிலிட்டிஸ் ஃபுட்டும் வந்து என்ஷூர் பண்ணும் அப்படிங்கிறது வந்து ஒரு பிக் கொஸ்டினா இருக்குது. மேலும் வந்து இப்போ 50% மைக்ரேஷன் வந்து அதர் இன்டர் ஸ்டேட்ல இருந்து வந்தவங்க எல்லாம் இப்போ அவங்க பிளேஸ்க்கே போயிட்டாங்க. போன அடிப்படையில மறுபடியும் இவங்க என்ன பண்ணுவாங்கன்னா அந்த இடத்த வந்து மில் ஒர்க்கரோ பாண்டட் லேபரோ இடத்த நிரப்புறதுக்கு இவங்க எல்லாமே தலித் பெண்களையும் தலித் ஃபேமிலிஸ் தான் டார்கெட் பண்ணுவாங்க. அந்த டார்கெட் பண்ற அந்த குழந்தைகளையும் அந்த விமன்ஸ் அந்த ஃபேமிலியும் நம்ம காப்பாற்ற வேண்டிய சுச்சுவேஷன்ல இருக்கும். இதுக்கெல்லாம் சேர்த்து நாம வந்து கவர்மெண்ட்டுக்கு எந்த மாதிரி கிரைவன்ஸ் ஒண்ணு வந்து நம்ம போடணும். லேபர் டிபார்ட்மெண்ட்ல நிறைய சேஞ்சஸ் வந்துட்டு இருக்கு, அதுக்கு நம்ம வந்து பண்ணணும் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி கேட்டுக்கிட்டு வாய்ப்புக்கு நன்றி சார். நன்றி, வணக்கம்.
Thanks, ma'am. It's a very powerful presentation. And yes, in all situations, it is always the weakest who suffer the most intensity. And unfortunately, it's always the rich who profit from all these also. Every disaster is an opportunity for the rich, and even prosperity, in so-called prosperity of the nation, it is the socially excluded communities, the weaker sections that actually are victimized, and very systematically at that. And unfortunately, that seems to be in the DNA of our very human race. It's a cliche, but humans very often don't have any humanity. So, thank you very much, Almelu Nigasonadal. And Nigasonadal, it's coming from your heart and from your experience. That makes it all the more powerful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Sam, are you back online or?
Yes, Edwin, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yes.
Okay, hope you'll be able to hear me. Yes, thank you. But I'm sorry, there is some technical glitch. I'm not able to connect my camera on the phone, or perhaps the app doesn't support the phone. I'll begin with how did the state government in Tamil Nadu respond to this pandemic? I would say initially the government was quite complacent. They were taking shelter behind the fact that there were no positive cases in Tamil Nadu. And they were also busy building a perception that the Tamil Nadu government is doing everything possible. They were busy buying equipment, medicine, masks, PPEs, and things like that. In that process, they missed out on making active changes or tangible changes on the ground in terms of ensuring social distancing, in terms of raising awareness among people, in terms of putting a system in place from the lessons learned from China. Even at that time, they were comparing with Kerala, that unlike Kerala, Tamil Nadu is far ahead and things like that. But while Kerala reached out to the grassroots level to raise awareness, to make sure things would change, we missed out on that. Even at the airport level, it was only screening and there was no effective contact tracing at that point in time. If that was effectively done, perhaps they could have checked the spread of virus quite early, not allowing this to spread this way. Secondly, even now, the Tamil Nadu government is only arguing with numbers in terms of the mortality rate is quite low, the recovery rate is quite high. But if you look the devil in the details, according to the present guidelines of people who can be discharged, not everyone who is discharged is cured or fully recovered. So that's again a kind of a debatable thing when the government says 50% of people have been discharged. Secondly, how did the government take care of the urban poor? Again, it's a kind of a rush to build perception against an ugly reality. For instance, the government claims that everybody was given free ration. Most of the rice card holders were also given 1,000 rupee dole. But if you look at the details, it's not for all ration card holders, only for those with a rice card. The free ration supply is given and the dole. And if you look at the Chennai city example, there are large chunks of a population who are migrants, poor migrants who could be a taxi driver, a Uber or Ola driver, who could be working as a delivery boy with Swiggy or Uber Eats, vendors, lots and lots of menial job uh, workers like plumbers or electricians who come from other neighboring districts. They would not have a ration card. They would not have any documents to show that they're residents of Chennai. And in this way, a large population is left out of that much publicized dole scheme. So they either they starve or they are completely incomeless. They wouldn't know what to do. And people like the Uber and Ola drivers, they also have a great financial commitment. Many would have borrowed money, not just from the established mainstream banks, but also from unorganized money lenders, private money lenders who can be absolutely ruthless. Nobody is bothered about that kind of a situation. Another example, the migrant laborers who work in the construction industry, automobile industry with hundreds of factories outside Chennai. The government publicized that all of them also were given 1,000 rupee dole. But there is a condition. They should have been registered with the welfare boards. not everybody is registered. I'll give you one example. In Kanchipuram, where I had done a story, there were 20,000 people approximately without food, without proper shelter, struggling. And the government said, no, everybody has been given free ration supply. Then when I investigated, 38,000 people are migrant laborers in Chengalpat district alone. But according to the government records, only around 6,000 plus, close to 7,000 have been registered. Only they have been given the free ration supply. So on record, there is a perception being built that all the migrant laborers have been taken care of. But if you see, 7,000 versus 31,000 people who are not registered, who are not considered as registered workers, and only after we flashed it, the administration, the district administration in Kanchipuram or Chengalpet said they have recommended the government to provide dry ration for these people as well. Secondly, the government was also trying to hijack relief work completely. Initially, there was a system put in place to allow volunteers, NGOs to also join hands and reach out to communities. But there was a political tug of war in Tamil Nadu, and the government said no, even NGOs ought to provide the supplies or route them through the corporation or government authorities. And again, that is cutting supplies given by NGOs, non-profit organizations, charitable organizations to people who are not reached by the government department. For example, if the government says they're giving breakfast through community kitchens, especially if they say they are taking cooked food to many communities outside, the breakfast would reach only before lunchtime, and the lunch would reach only before dinner time. That's the pace with which they work. That's the kind of how things are taken for granted. And that's again a huge lapse, I would say, by the government to not make NGOs as partners in this crisis, but to see them as rivals or to keep them at bay to score political brownie points. Lastly, well, the government ensured government employees are taken care of by giving them salaries on date. They announced that people who are in the unorganized sector, their employers ought to provide them salaries, but there is no mechanism to find out whether it was ensured or not. Many hundreds of factories did pay for the month of March, but for April, many paid 50%, some did not pay, and it's going to be the same or even worse for the month of June. Nobody's going to pay them for May, saying that we don't have the revenue to pay you. But who ensures, who makes, or who brings these employers, factories, companies to account to ensure that their employees are paid? Likewise, let's just say a sad situation with regard to domestic helps, people who work as laborers at homes in various at various levels. You also asked me to talk about heartbreaking stories. I can share a few very crisply. One, we went to a Rohingya shelter where around 81 people for the last 7 years have been put up in a cyclone shelter outside Chennai. When we went, that poor man from Myanmar, he said he has two little children. He can't even get them biscuits. When these little children who are completely unaware of the crisis across the world ask him biscuits, he doesn't know what to give them. That's the kind of situation. I stepped into his little rickety house and saw they live in such horrible conditions, terrible conditions. You won't believe. They live in tin roof. They have no privacy. There's nothing in the one room house to something that the children can eat. That's the kind of people we're talking about. Then I also went to another migrant area, again on the IT corridor. One man who's around 50 who has come from rural Odisha, he says, I had sent all my 8,000 rupees salary, last month's salary to my family. And for the month of April, my employers have not given me. In fact, he works for a company. And my son and daughter, they both are in college. They keep calling every day asking to pay fees. I don't know what to do. That's again another tragic condition. Another man, again, he works for a private industrial unit at Ambattur. He got his daughter married recently. He's in very deep debt. And his owner gave him salary for the month of March, half the salary for the month of April. He could not pay the EMI due for his the debt for his daughter's wedding. But again, a private money lender is the one he had got the money from. And he says, I literally drank water whenever I felt hungry so that I can save little money to repay that debt. It's these extreme conditions to which the situation has pushed people to. Any positive, inspiring stories you ask me? I can again give 2 or 3. I met a group of physically challenged, disabled, or differently abled group of women put up in a shelter in the heart of Chennai, and they selflessly started stitching masks so that they can give them to the corporation sanitary workers who are again an ignored lot, so that they can do their work with some level of protection. Inspiring story. Again, who would have thought that people who require help themselves would strain all their nerves to reach out to another ignored community to make sure the community which serves Chennai to as 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 COVID warriors will be helped this way by providing them masks. Again, another inspiring story from this Rohingya community. Whenever we journalists ask people, 99% you will get, they know if you speak on TV, you should ask, you should project a very bad situation, you should paint a very bad picture. So getting that kind of a reaction is very easy. But this man was refusing to complain. This man was refusing to say he's in need. He said, yes, we have difficulty. Yes, I don't get salary. But thank God we get help. A lot of strangers come and help us. And my wife, my little baby, are quite happy with whatever we get because the entire world is suffering. And we are not here to complain. Again, an inspiring story that even in this kind of a difficult situation, which has affected the rich and the poor, the developed and the poor countries, there are people who understand ground realities and they're just thankful for what they get. And they don't have that habit of complaining. Lastly, what needs to be done? I thought it's time the country, the state thought about stopping treating people as beggars. Why should we make people wait for food, for money, for doles? You live in a digital era. You have linked Aadhaar cards with bank accounts. But what else you do that? You have in your computers ready information. Who are the people who don't have money? Who are the people below poverty line? Why can't you transfer in a by the click of a button? 5,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees, so they can right royally spend the money they want according to the priorities they face or they need, they look at. Why should we make people depend only for food? Why should you just keep them keep supplying only grains? Why can't you give them money, let them spend the way, buy what they want, the way they want? Secondly, it's important, it's not good just to boast of the IT technology, of the IT capability of a country, unless it serves the common man. And it's in these times we should put our technology to good use so they can bring about changes, would ameliorate the difficulties of a vast majority of our country. Lastly, ensure dignity. For example, when it comes to migrant workers, why should it take so many days to arrange trains? Why should it take so many days to get to coordinate with the home states? If you have 50,000 people, it's your responsibility to send them back home. Why do you want to make it a red tape? Get the list first, send it to that home state, and they take their own sweet time to respond. Until then, these people are put to hardship and they want to get back to their home. Give them the dignity due. That's very, very important. And lastly, again, a heartbreaking thing I forgot to add earlier. When the government announced at the middle of the lockdown that construction industry can resume work if they're able to provide accommodation for the workers in their own campus, many had started to resume their work. A video was going rounds at that point in time. A team of police officials trying to convince the workers when they were trying to get back to their homes. When they're trying to take the next available train, they were trying to force them to stay there so that their bosses, the companies they work for, can resume their industrial activity. This is another extreme level of selfish attitude. And imagine police being used by those companies to pressurize these helpless people. Of course, I reported that to senior police officers. They denied that. But these are untold stories where uh, the dispensation or several arms of the government try to indulge in these coercive practices so that people would be available to help industries resume work, but at the same time they deny them dignity, deny them the due when they are the backbone of your state in terms of building your state, in terms of improving your economy. But when there is a crisis, they are just left in the lurch. Lastly, imagine when there is elections, how simplified the systems have been put in place by political parties to distribute cash for votes. They have their own uh, party workers put up in different places. No matter how many police are on duty, they make sure the money goes to every family to get their votes. But in this kind of situation, they don't think of giving them money. They think of giving them charity in a sense. They think that they treat migrants as, in a sense, maybe it's a crude word to call them like beggars, but that's how they treat, because they would not want them to be given cash, but they want them to be made dependent even for a bowl of grain. And lastly, it's important every state, at the national level, we build a contingency fund. Even a small percentage of our taxes be reserved for this so that money can be generously given instead of in a very helpless way, scrambling for funds saying that we don't have the money. Why should we do that? You have your budget, have some reserve fund for a crisis like this, for a pandemic like this, at least from now on, so that people can be treated with dignity, they can be given their due. And remember, the poorest of the poor are the ones who build your country, and it's important we treat them fairly with dignity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam. That was really very, very broad in scope. The reason why I didn't introduce you at all is that you're anyway known as the face of Chennai for now almost a couple of decades. And it's a very, very sane voice, a very mature voice in your assessment of things that you have seen firsthand and almost at the front line yourself. So thank you very, very much. I recognize my friend, Dr. Krishnan. Krishnan, could you come on and is your mic working? Could you please come on for a while and tell us what your experience was, just short, because we need to wrap up too. But before Krishnan comes on for the panelists, we have a couple of questions. One is mainly, now what distinguishes Chennai's handling of the lockdown from the rest of the other metropolises, like Mumbai, Delhi, and Ahmedabad? And the other one was how badly did the government respond to the Coimbatore hotspot? And the last one was the movement of migrant workers within and into the state. How was that tackled by the government? So, Krishnan, if you're ready, please can you come on while the panelists will prepare their wrapping up based on these questions. Dr. Krishnan has been doing this response both in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. And Krishnan? I thought he's still there. Yeah, your mic is also on. Please go ahead. Krishnan, your mic is not, it's on, but we can't hear you. Are you using headphones or something? We'll try to sort that out. Then, Sam, can you stay on for a little longer? Then I'll give Esther and Amba the chance to wrap up, and while I get Krishnan back online. Esther, would you like to go first?
Okay. Yeah. Initially, I'm not very sure like whether Sam heard me in the beginning, but after listening to Sam, I was also recollecting some of the experiences that we have had during this COVID time, and rightly he has pointed out that it is the time that the government need to ensure that the cash is actually being transferred to the community. That's one of the key things that needs to happen immediately. Now, even after the Supreme Court has taken a suo motu call with regard to migrant workers, but still the challenge remains on the ground. Like, for example, today, like our experience from today, around 9 migrant workers from Bihar, they wanted to go back to Bihar, and they're still struggling with getting the train ticket. And earlier, what they have booked, that didn't work out, and they really lost their hope of going back. So in fact, like they were asking us like, are you going to do anything about it, or we are ready to walk this morning? So these are some of the challenges that remains on the ground. What we see is like there is inequality in our society given varied reasons. Maybe it is post-COVID, we all need to collectively think how we would reimagine and recreate a world that would actually be a fair world and equal world for everyone. And everyone would be, as Sam has also pointed out, this is what initially also I have mentioned, like everyone in this world, that is our mission too. Every human being should feel that they are actually living a life with dignity. And I hope this COVID situation, but some of the questions that you have raised, like it actually migrant workers issue was still not actually addressed well, even in the current context, because I could see that still CSOs and NGOs are running around collecting donations from known people and trying to pack food for the migrant workers who are going. Though the Supreme Court has issued order to state government to ensure food, water, and all that, but still it remains a big question. I think it's high time the state also need to change their focus into all this while, like we cannot claim ourselves that we have addressed this pandemic so well, but however, it is high time now that we are going to get on to the next phase of lockdown. Still people are not aware, like it's not definite, it's not definitely announced to people. So I think that kind of a thing that government has to look into, and also as we complete the phase 5 of this lockdown phases, what are the other things that we need to look at in terms of rejuvenating the people, the informal sector workers, the migrant workers who have been so badly impacted by this COVID, could restart our whole new life. That's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther. Krishnan's connection is going off and on. It says that it's a little bit. Yeah, Krishnan, can you unmute and try talking now? Krishnan? Okay, so I think we'll need to try Krishnan again. So it's almost like Russian roulette. We come back to Krishnan and then we jump back to the next person. Amba, would you go next?
Hi, just a minute. Yeah. I want to thank all of the co-panelists for their intervention. Sorry, Tamil konja, my Tamil is really bad, but I understood the sharings, and I think that there are a lot of very, very common issues which arise. I think that the fact that this has really it's made the existing gaps and marginalization worse. And as you've been more marginalized, it's like things have become even worse for those communities. And I think that while there are serious reflections to be made, also I think one of the findings is that when we're looking at this as a disaster, and it's been looked at from the perspective of disaster management, how far have persons with disabilities been included in your communication, in your service delivery, in the design of prevention? Someone rightly said it is a health crisis, but the fact is that it's actually been policing, and it's been like all policing, it's been very, very far away from the humanity and empathy that's required. I think that it is something that we need to take back the findings. I would just say it's really, really important to document. I'm so happy that Sam Daniel is here, because to talk about the role of the media in documenting all of these stories, so that these issues are going to keep happening. It's not like the coronavirus or some form of it is not going to come back. And now the government is they have a protocol in place. They know that they can shut down a city regardless of the cost, and we don't know how that's going to be used. So I think one is the reflection as civil society as a whole as to the use of this tool of lockdown. And the second is looking at inclusiveness. The last point I want to make is when we're talking about the lifting of the lockdown, which is happening in many places, again, there are concerns that persons with disabilities have about, the way in which that will be implemented. So, for example, for people with disabilities who are in shelters or otherwise institutional settings, there is a lot of concern about the isolation that's already being experienced there and how that's just going to get worse. The other aspect, which I think is really important, is when we're looking at employment. So we know that factories and establishments, for example, they can begin again and they can have 30% staff. The disability sector feels that it's unlikely that their staff, the people with disabilities who work there, are going to be included in that 30% staff. It's usually like a last in, first out kind of situation where people with disabilities are really worried that if they have jobs, when the jobs open up again, will they be taken back, or will they lose their jobs, as part of the issue of keeping everything, limited and keeping the numbers low. Thank you very much once again. And if there are any questions, but I don't think there's time. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Amba. Now Krishnan seems to be all right. Krishnan, if you don't do it this time, then I'm at a loss to know what to do. Can you talk now? Okay. We are going to do something which normally should not be done, but since Krishnan has got that much of experience, what I'll do is I'll call him and put him on the speakerphone so that Krishnan, could you just talk on your phone for about 2 minutes of your experience?
Okay. Trying to speak with you, but I forgot.
Krishnan, can you put off your mic? Yeah. Now, yeah, please go ahead.
You are hearing my voice?
Yes, now I can hear your voice.
Okay. See, this whole COVID pandemic, which is an unexpected and management by the both state, central, and the organization. So far, if you see last few years, none of the state and central government were interested in NGOs' participation in national development. But when the crisis comes, they all started requesting the non-government organizations and volunteers to support in order to respond to COVID. However, that's a different story. Now, let me come to the migrant workers and the bricking workers specifically. The migrant workers who are mainly unurban sector, especially the bricking workers, contribute largely for the development of cities across the world, and especially in India, last 20 to 30 years, their contribution is huge level. Even though they give very good houses and infrastructure for the urban people, but these people with their families, they always live under the sun in a basic living condition. This is the general situation. Almost, if you see across the country, we have 240,000 bricklanes in India. And 23 million workers are employed, and all of them are in unorganized sector. Whereas around 16,000 bricklaying industries are located in Tamil Nadu. And largely, that is Tiruvallur, Kanchipuram, Vellore, Tiruvannamalai. And if you go to western Tamil Nadu, again Coimbatore, Erode in those areas. When it comes to Tiruvallur area, almost a lakh of migrant workers are working around the cities in unorganized sector, mainly in bricklanes. Among these, most of the bricklanes, there is a case study about Pudugupam area, there is a case study about STA bricklane area, there is a case study about Tanagam bricklane area. But let me come to the key issues what the migrant workers are facing is, migrant workers, especially bricklane workers are facing is, there is a payment of low wages. There is a wage payment. The most labor due to advance. Yes, from advance. And compulsion of work for long hours, that is average 12 to 16 hours in a day. And then overheated working conditions. Physical and verbal abuse. Restricted freedom of movement, not even to allowed to go to hospital. There is a regular violence, assault, and misuse of words and atrocities. And there none of the bricklayers are maintaining books of records and register. Children are forced to work. Lack of healthcare facilities, that is, many of them are suffered due to unavailability of drinking water and toilet facilities. Middleman and false agreement is huge. And the pain, anxiety, and insecurity which occurred during COVID-19 made the bricklayer workers to raise their voice for their wages, and they demanded the government that they want to go to the native sector, where the problem started. When it comes to response, who are in charge to resolve these things? There are 5 key people who are supposed to play a role. One is the state government. Second, district administration. Third, within the district, the role of DM and SDM. The DM is district magistrate and sub-district magistrate. And then the role of police and the role of labor department. In this whole picture of COVID-19, the labor department did not come to any conclusion, did not even the ministers of labor secretaries and labor commissioners who were from state and central, they were totally absent. And the other major thing is the role of national and state monitoring agencies, such as in order to see the violence should not happen in any bricklanes, and also to see the body level system action should be enforced properly. Whatever this is given to national human rights commission, which was not an option in this COVID-19 situation. Here, the district administration and the police and the labor who were supposed to help the migrant workers and bricklayer workers, they were in the other side. They were in the opposite side. Because of that, almost in every state, especially my experience, we are getting cases in many areas. Both in Telangana and some part in South Andhra and in 15 districts in Tamil Nadu, bricklayer workers are the largest sufferers. Anyway, all the migrant workers are suffering, but whereas bricklayer workers, all of them are living in a poverty, extremely, they're vulnerable people, they're illiterate totally, so both men, women, and children, they are affected a lot. This was not highlighted very much compared to all other issues. So what should be the action? If you want to experience of bricklayer workers, is a tragedy. They never thought that this COVID-19 is going to create a huge problem. Now the issue is, none of the bricklayer owners are allowing them because they think that they pay that much. They want to extract labor from the labor and then only they want to send the people. But this police is supporting. Police is they got advance, they have to work. Another problem is there is a law called Interstate Mine Workman Act, which came in 1979.
Krishnan, just one moment.
Section 14 and 15. I'm completing.
Because they say it is not clear. Please complete and then I will translate.
Yeah. So the problem of the whole thing is not implementation of the key. It is this alarming sector is not registered by the government. So the problem is that database also the problem. The government responds to the problem. What we need is multiple stakeholders within the group to monitor and support and bring in recommendations. This is what I would say.
Thank you, Dr. Krishnan. I'm extremely sorry that we couldn't hear him well enough. But the crux of what he said was that there are several laws that are there. There are several mechanisms at all levels, and yet none of them function to actually support the Britain workers who are bonded laborers in their time of need. That was, and it had a cascading effect where even the children had to complete the quota of brick making before they were allowed to leave in the government organized trains. Yeah, we have exactly 5 minutes left. Sam, could I ask you to talk for 3 minutes or 2 minutes, and then I'll have 2 minutes and we can give Ankit the final word for a minute. Is that okay, Sam? Yeah, I think Sam also cannot.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
can you hear
now
me?
we can. Yes, Sam, go ahead.
All right. I thought I'll talk to you about, I'll respond to the question on Coimbatore. Coimbatore, as of now, is responsible for infecting at least 2,600 people. But the bigger question is whether officials failed to intervene at the right time. In the month, I think on April 24th, the first case was detected. Had they immediately shut down the market at that point in time, this kind of spread of virus could have been largely checked, which took the virus to not just across Chennai, but also in the neighboring districts of Chengalpet, Kanchipuram, Tiruvallur, as far as Villupuram, some even from Perambalur, as farmers bring the produce from far off districts. That's one practical thing. And secondly, should they have shut down the market even before, when they started implementing social distancing in many other markets? For some reason, Coimbatore was ignored or left out. The government blames it on the adamant stand of the shopkeepers, but that may be debatable. But they could have certainly averted this kind of crisis going out of hand. And secondly, another point was they use technology for the wrong things. Instead of using technology to identify the most needy people to transfer cash for them in a jiffy, they are using technology asking the poor migrant laborers to register online. Imagine how many online migrant laborers would have a smartphone or access to a laptop, or even would know how to read what is in Tamil, for instance, or in English for that matter. And ideally, they should have opened up a call center like setup where anybody can call that number, give them their name, details, Aadhaar number, which they could have entered in no time. Within 24 hours, they would have got the whole details of all the migrant laborers across Tamil Nadu. And it's strange, a state which depends so much on guest workers doesn't have a ready reckoner to at any point in time to know how many are in the state working for various industries. All of these are mostly organized sector, and that's something where we have failed again. It's important we establish a dynamic record system so that when people get out of the state, it will reflect that. When people come in, that will again reflect. It's also true the government has done some amazing good work as well, just that in terms of migrant laborers, in terms of preventing this escalation of the virus, they have been complacent. But in terms of taking the welfare schemes, in terms of taking the at least for the people who are eligible under Makkala Puruthavarikku, I think the government has done a lot to ensure that at least the people who are entitled to receive these funds, அவங்களுக்கு வேண்டிய ரேஷன் பொருளா இருக்கும், கேஷா இருக்கும், போய் சேர்றதுக்கான வாய்ப்பு உருவாக்கிட்டாங்க. One more area they could also improve is ensuring the physically challenged community get a priority in these things. For example, not every disabled person would be able to go to the ration shop. They employ a friend, a relative to go and collect that. And they are also asked to stand in that long queue. And that is unfair because they represent someone special and they volunteer their time to help them. It's important that they are given that respect and they are treated as someone helping a disabled or a differently able person so that they don't have to wait like other people in the queue. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sam. Just to wind up, thank you everyone for being there. I think what has been said right across is that what the government should have done for the poor, they've used technology against the poor rather than empowering. They've used it for surveillance rather than support. Communities had to take care of themselves. It became a command and control structure. And much of this command and control structure and systems will remain even after the pandemic is over. And that is the scary part. And communities have to take care of themselves. That's what works. And when the chips are down, it has been eminently proved that we cannot depend on the government. The government is clueless. Power does not mean that they are right. And very often, we need to build up our own systems for resilience. So thank you very much. We have not been able to give space to very many other marginalized communities, but we know who they are, and I hope in the forthcoming part of the series, we will cover them. Ankit, over to you.
Thanks, Edwin. It was really an engaging and very thoughtful discussion, to see the least. And I really want to thank Esther, Jerujonsi, Amba, and Sam for speaking their thoughts and to enlightening us. And most of the speakers are ace in their fields, and especially I would like to thank, and it's really hurtful to say that Florina Xavier was one of the speakers who had to join the panel, but she couldn't join due to an unfortunate scenario. But Amba, thanks a lot, Amba, that she just chipped in and she spoke really well. Next in the series is Nagpur on 2nd of June. So I wish you all join there too. And I think it has been really a happy experience for all of us to listen to the experiences from these cities, which are different in size and population and demography and geographical and regimes. And all the cities have been showing some responses, some good, some bad, and some experience which we can learn from. So thanks a lot for everyone, the speakers, the moderator, Edwin, thanks a lot, and the participants who have been so patient and so thoughtful about this. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.